Usually when you're solving the biggest problems, you get the biggest prize.
People will choose geothermal because it makes a lot of sense. And it sounds easy and simple and smooth, and it was anything but.
All right, guys, welcome back to Built in America. We have Kathy Hannun here. She's the founder of Dandelion. She is a fantastic entrepreneur that has solved something massive in the business space today. Kathy, thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having me on.
Kathy, I'm going to start this podcast off with a preface where I admire most entrepreneurs who solve some of the biggest problems today. And I think what you solved at Dandelion is immaculate. Give us a breakdown of how it all started.
Sure. So first, I have to start by saying I wish I could say we have solved this problem, but probably the most I can claim is that we're solving it, and we have made a little bit of progress. But that problem is a huge fraction of the greenhouse gas emissions in the United States come from heating and cooling buildings. It's probably around 20% or so, and it can be one of the biggest sources of emissions for an individual building. So if you look at a home, let's say in New York or another cold climate region, 80+% of the greenhouse gas emissions from that home are going to come from heating. And most heating today is done using fossil fuels. So typically people use natural gas or heating oil or propane for heating. Lots of people are talking about heat pumps, and there's two main types of heat pumps, air source and ground source. What Dandelion is doing is we're making ground source heat pumps. We're bringing them to scale, making them easy to use, cost effective, and part of the menu of options that people can choose from when they're deciding what to buy for their home. And geothermal are the most efficient, cost effective types of heat pumps. There's actually no less expensive way to heat or cool a home once you already have one. The problem has always been getting it installed. And so that's really what Dandelion is focused on. How can we make the process of getting a geothermal heat pump easy enough and cheap enough that many, many, many more people can take advantage of this technology?
And Kathy, where do you start with trying to solve this problem? I mean, this is a very complex problem to go solve. Tell us a little about your background. How did you get here?
Yeah, I was working at Google, and I had a position at Google's X Lab, which is the part of Google that does like the self-driving car, I guess did the self-driving car before it became Waymo, and other moonshot projects. And I had this I ended up kind of in a roundabout way getting this pretty amazing job, especially given my relative lack of qualification at the time. But I got to be on the team that decided and sort of tried to find new moonshots for X to pursue. And I've always been really interested in energy and the environment. And so I was focusing on like, what are the best opportunities to apply technology and product to make progress with how we deal with energy infrastructure. And I didn't even know about geothermal heat pumps. It wasn't really on my short list. But a colleague actually sent an email to like thousands of people working at Google because he was very passionate about why geothermal heat pumps were the single biggest opportunity to transition the U.S. to renewable energy, which seems like a very grandiose claim, but it piqued my interest. And the more I learned about geothermal, the more convinced I became too that if we can solve this problem and make them more common in the U.S., it will just make such a dramatic difference.
So you started at Google X. It's basically a venture lab where you can go create the best moonshots possible from Google. Obviously, they have some of those pronounced companies that come out of there. And then you spin off from Google and say, I want to go start this company called Dandelion. That's solving the 800-pound gorilla that I think a lot of people want to go solve, but they don't know how to go from like actual A to B, right? That's probably the hardest part. What was kind of the first, second, and third step you did when starting Dandelion? And then tell us about the kind of the hardest parts from actually starting that endeavor as well.
Certainly one of the challenges at the very beginning was there wasn't really a clear way to take a concept developed at Google X and make it into a startup. I think that's become a much more common path. We figured out, there's something here. There is this opportunity in geo. I felt so convinced of it. But at the same time, it looked increasingly like not a great opportunity for Google, because Google doesn't necessarily want to be drilling ground loops in people's yards and installing HVAC systems. And so it was clear that while this could be a great concept, it wasn't a great fit. And I wasn't ready to let it go and find the next thing that might be a better fit for Google, just because it's rare to find an opportunity that looks like it could have such high impact and is still tractable. So even though I'm not a person who thought of myself as an entrepreneur, I never imagined I would start a company. It was sort of the only way to keep the idea going, to really try to execute on it. So what that looked like is we had to create a process for X to spin out a startup, and then I had to raise venture funding, which I had never done. And I think any entrepreneur would tell you that was certainly one challenge. I remember having a meeting early on with a friendly, generous person who agreed to meet with me and sort of counsel me. And one of the questions I asked him, I was literally like, what does one even pitch? Like, what does a pitch even look like? You know what I mean? I was used to pitching internally to Google for money, so I had done that. But it's a very different thing that an external investor is looking for. So, um, like many entrepreneur before and since, I learned through trial and error and got a lot of rejection, but eventually secured some seed funding. And one of the nice things about geothermal heat pumps is they existed already. Like, what we were trying to do as a company was dramatically ease the experience of getting one installed, make it cheaper, make it simpler, make it a better customer experience, productize this technology that has existed for a long time. So the first year was really just getting some experience installing systems for homeowners in upstate New York. So that was the first step that we took.
So, Kathy, you came from more of a corporate background working at Google, and they said, I'm going to go start this company and you're going to go raise money to go do this. You don't have experience of using outside capital to go build a team. This is all new. Tell us those people that you hired, a board, potentially your key members, because when raising money, the first thing they ask you is, so who else is on the team? Kathy, you're great, but who's going to go execute with you along this journey?
Yeah. My co-founder's name is James Quasi. He had started a contracting company that had been acquired by Solar City. So he had both had the experience of running a company that did home energy improvements, and then has experienced some of Solar City's growth trajectory. And we envisioned the company at that time as being kind of like a rooftop solar style company that was doing geothermal. So he was a very helpful co-founder to have, because he had a lot more domain experience in that type of work than I did. And we hired, I think one of the challenging things for any first-time entrepreneur with a very small seed stage company, it's like hard to get people to work for you because you don't have a lot of credibility. And I had the advantage of Google X spin-out status, which was a huge advantage. But even then, it's like combined with what you mentioned, the lack of experience, hiring, raising money, running a company, you also just don't have yet the proof points, I guess, to convince people to take a risk on you. And so you end up attracting in the early days, or at least I did, it's like either people you have a relationship with from the past. And again, my co-founder was very valuable here because he had been in this world of home contracting and solar. So his contacts were much more relevant than mine, having been at Google for 7 years before that. But then also you get people that are willing to take a big risk. They might be earlier on in their career, hungry, but unproven themselves. And so they're willing to sort of be paid mostly in equity. You know what I mean? And sort of take on the unknown. So that's largely what our team looked like. It was a bunch of people who had worked with James in the past, who had come out of solar or um, Solar City or, the energy space. And then a few just like brave, young, hungry individuals who were excited about the mission.
So when starting this off, basically you had to go back to people at Google, potentially other people you knew. Hey, look, we don't have data points today, but I think we can get there. You had to go sell yourself, not only to raise money, to go hire excellent people, which usually costs twice as much money to really get really good people to come work for you, right? And you found a way to go do so. So what was probably the hardest part in the very beginning on getting data points to actually work, right? What you're doing is incredibly challenging. There's a combination of solar installations, there's a digital component as well. Putting this all together is not easy. So where's the underlying factor that you realize, things are actually going to start working here? Like where's that first inflection point?
The number one fact we had about the company that was helpful in the early days was it was obvious people wanted the product. So, I was doing marketing and sales as somebody who had never done those things for a heating system in upstate New York, not even in New York City. Like we started in the Albany area. It's not an early adopter market, and we were offering this thing that was a little weird because geothermal isn't that well known, and yet we sold, I don't know, like $500,000 worth of geothermal in like the first 3 months of trying. It was something um, where it was very obvious that like this value proposition was resonating with normal people. And I think that fact plus the momentum at that time around, well, I guess at the very beginning it hadn't started yet. So never mind. I was going to say the momentum around clean tech, but that didn't help us until a little bit later. I think at the very beginning it was just probably, to be honest, probably the Google X legacy, just being able to say like, you know, we have we are a spin out from X. Like we did bet this at X. And at that time we had a lot of resources going into this and doing market studies and looking at the technology, and like we could bring all of that to bear because it was still ours. Plus, look, people really want this product, and that is undeniable. So those were the facts that we had in our pros column. And then I think in the cons column, when talking to investors, there, we got one of the objections that we got all the time, and it could have just been a polite way of saying no, but like it's very easy for an investor to say, this is a bit too far afield for us, or we don't know enough about geothermal heat pumps to be confident making this investment. And of course, the challenge for us is like no one knows enough about geothermal heat pumps. And like at that time, there weren't nearly as many clean tech focused investors. So it was a bit of a, I don't know, it fell a little bit outside most people's thesis.
I mean, usually when you're solving the biggest problems, you get the biggest prize. You look at SpaceX, you look at Neuralink, things that Elon's solving today. I can almost categorize you as someone that's solving something that's massive in that same category. I want to go back to you do your first $500,000 in sales. What's the sales process look like at Dandelion? Like when you first start going to where it is now, I'm very curious. Like, are you guys actually working with GCs, going out there knocking on doors to go present this like a solar salesman? How do you get started in this industry?
Yeah, at the very beginning, it was very similar to solar. And I was going to farmers markets and, like I remember I was literally advertising Dandelion at a farmers market in like the Hudson Valley, and a rainstorm came in and it started pouring. And everyone sort of like found an umbrella or like a tent to stand under because some of the booths had tents. So I was just under this tent in this rainstorm standing next to a woman waiting out the rain, and we got to talking, and like she ended up buying geothermal from us, you know what I mean? Or like it was that type of thing. We were just in the community talking to people, going to churches, going to farmers markets. Um, I think because we had so many people from the solar market uh, influencing the company in the early days, We did try a lot of the same tactics. I think we were too slow, but it was fine. We got there eventually to realize, and shame on me because I was coming from Google. It turned out like digital advertising was all we really needed. I mean, it's nice. It was good in the beginning to have all those conversations with potential customers. And I think there was a lot of market research that was accomplished, and I don't regret it. But at the end of the day, it was much more cost effective just to become really good at Google and Facebook and all the things you would imagine than to be out there. But it was appropriate for those earliest days.
You got to really feel the pain a little bit, being in the rain, knocking on a door. I kind of miss the Google days, right? Hell, to go back there,
It was very different.
doing solar sales and doing knocking on doors is no easy task. I commend you for doing so. And then throughout the process, I'm sure things have changed. You started getting really good at Google ads, Facebook ads, and driving a lot more traffic. Where did the exponential growth really start happening? I saw you recently raised $250,000 as a Series C. Tell us about like where things, the boom just started happening therefore after.
Yeah, as we got better at marketing and honestly, as oil prices went up over the um, years, and also policy got much more favorable to heat pumps. So the value proposition just got better and better for customers. I think we actually did do a good job on building awareness. Many more people today know what a geothermal heat pump is than they did when we started. We just continued to see really good sales traction. The revenue was going up exactly how investors would want, and um, and it was, I don't want it. It's like I can say it, and it sounds easy and simple and smooth, and it was anything but. Of course, when you're experiencing it, it's like we hit one obstacle after another. Just to give you one example, one of the parts of installing a geothermal heat pump is you have to install ground loops in the customer's yard. And ground loops are plastic pipes. It's like a pipe with a U-bend, which is like a hairpin turn on the bottom, and then another pipe coming out. So it's kind of like two pipes in parallel connected at the bottom. And they're only 1.5 inches in diameter, so like pretty small. And you drill a 4 to 6 inch hole in the ground with a drill. That hole goes like 300 to 600 feet deep. Then you put those plastic pipes in the hole, fill it with grout, and connect it into the home. So that's what a ground loop is. It's a critical part of a geothermal heat pump system. And you need a drill to put it in. And pretty early on, we maxed out with the drills available, contractors available in our market that could do this. And so, of course, that's like a pretty big problem for the company because our growth is just like capped, right? If we can't find more drilling. So there was a whole year where that was the big emergency for the company. And we ended up going to Sweden, where 20% of the homes have geo, and they've been doing it for half a century. It's like fully deployed. And they taught us the cost of putting in a ground loop in Sweden is about 20% of what it is in the US. It's just like incredibly more efficient there because they've really honed this over the past 50 years. I think it's mostly due to like process, which what I mean is like in the US at that time, it was a water well driller who would do geothermal if they had capacity outside of a side thing. In Sweden, it's like they have it dialed. And in the US, it would take like 4 days, let's say, for a water well driller to do a typical project. And the equipment is not designed for geo. It's designed for water well. They're just using it to do geo. In Sweden, it's like every project takes a day. They do a project a day. They have a one-man crew instead of a 4-man crew. That one person is using a much cheaper piece of equipment, like specifically designed for geothermal heat pump installation. It's just like it's everything about the process. It's better for homeowners because it's less messy, it's less expensive, it's more efficient. It's like purpose built for geo. So anyway, they taught us their ways. And like basically we adapted them to the US. You can't exactly copy what they do for a list of detailed reasons that aren't worth getting into, but we were able to build up our own fleet of drillers and rigs and supply ourselves with drilling and unlock that barrier to growth. But it was hard. It's like I never envisioned needing to figure out how to start and grow a drilling company. And I can't say I don't deserve much credit for it. Like other team members really took the lead on that project, but it was new to all of us. And it was hard, but it was required to maintain the growth curve that we wanted to be on. And I mean, more relevantly, just to achieve our mission of making geothermal cost effective and available to people.
What is your mission today at Dandelion? I know obviously you guys are a fast growing revenue company, you raise a ton of money, but you guys are also mission oriented today. How do you align your mission and also while growing revenue at the same time and align that with investors?
hmm This is my favorite thing about the company, so I'm glad you asked. One thing that we have that's so special is we literally don't make money. Well, the only way we make money is by replacing a furnace or boiler with a geothermal heat pump or installing geothermal in a new home when something else would have been installed instead. So every revenue dollar is the result of deploying geothermal, which is the most environmentally friendly method available to do heating and cooling. And it really aligns the incentives in the company because maximizing our revenue and our profitability is totally aligned to maximizing our positive impact. And it's not something we really have to think about. And there's a simplicity to that I just appreciate so much.
That's unique. I mean, it's hard to find a company today where you have a mission that's so powerful that you're growing at the same time and that satisfies investors today. So, my hat goes off to you. Um, how do you balance mainly the technical and operation demands of scaling a business while staying focused on what investors want, right? So the dream outcome for investors, I assume, is potentially an IPO, potentially a sell. But sometimes in a business while you're scaling, there could be some conflict of interest. How do you as a founder, align your incentives with your investors?
I think, again, the fact that our financial outcomes are so tied to our deployment of geothermal simplifies this problem for us because both, if for the investors to get what they want most, which is a long, like a long-term, very positive financial impact, there's no way to accomplish our mission without that, right? Like in order to have the size of impact that we want to have, we will necessarily have to generate a ton of revenue and be a very successful company. It's like they're totally tied. And so it is helpful, which isn't to say that, of course, reasonable people can disagree on strategy for how you get there. I've been lucky, though. I think my board is very supportive and like tends to work well together. And there haven't I can't think of like a time when there's really been a fight on financial versus mission. I think yeah, I do think we've been really fortunate in that our board has been part of the team and like really with us.
And what's the dream outcome for you guys? I'm sure obviously revenue is massive for you guys today. Do you guys looking to sell later on? Do you guys want to hold on this for a long time? Do you want an IPO? How do you guys thought about that while building this company?
I have to say, like, what my dream outcome is, I think that geothermal should just be part of the standard way of heating and cooling homes. And I want everyone from like the largest home builders in the United States to just typical people that own homes to be thinking, okay, it's time to replace my heating system or time to choose a heating system. Do I want geothermal? Like, I think if they just ask the question and look into the numbers, a lot of people will choose geothermal because it makes a lot of sense. And we're starting to get there. Like, we're starting to see home builders and homeowners who are not luxury, who are not eco-driven necessarily, electing to go with geo because it does make a lot of sense. And if it's yeah, I just want it to be on the menu. I want it to be like part of the consideration set in all of these decisions. And if we get there, it'll be a massive company. Like we and then what we do with it, sell, like, I don't know. It's like I just want to do whatever outcome lets us um continue to innovate and invest and sort of make progress on the problem. And as a founder, I feel pretty open about like what opportunity presents itself in the future that will let us do that the best. I have a CEO of the company. I'm not the CEO anymore, but Dan Yates is, and he's a great business strategist. So I'm sure he would have an answer that was more specific and satisfying to this question because I'm sure he thinks about it much more often than I do. And I trust him so much that I would just say, let's do whatever Dan thinks on this one. But yeah, from my perspective, success is just continuing to make geo mainstream.
When do you transition from founder, you were a CEO, and now you're a founder and not the CEO role?
So it happened at the very beginning of 2020, right before COVID, and we were a New York-based company. So in some ways, my timing couldn't have been better because that was a big project for the CEO to have to figure out. But I guess what happened was um, I believe in the idea. I'm committed to the idea. I never thought I'd start a company, but I did because I want this idea to happen. And I was the most, I was leading our fundraising. I was leading our spin out. I was like doing a lot of the CEO things. I made the most sense as the CEO at the beginning. Um, but honestly, I didn't love it. It was like pretty obvious to me fairly early on that I just wasn't, I was willing to do the role. But if given the choice, I would have preferred not to be the CEO. And like, I think the hard thing, as you said, is that choosing somebody else to be the CEO, it's like a huge risk. Because if you choose the wrong person, you can destroy the company and like you lose control. And so and like when you're very early stage, it's like, who else is going to do this job? You know what I mean? It's kind of like the hiring question where you kind of have to accomplish enough that the opportunity to be CEO attracts somebody of the caliber you would feel okay hiring for the role. Um, and I felt like we had gotten there by the end of 2019. So Dan Yates, who is now our CEO, he was my mentor um, pretty much from the beginning. And I asked him initially to be CEO because I had correctly identified that he would be a fantastic CEO of this company. But he had recently sold his company, Power, and it was a very successful sale, but I think he was very tired. And honestly, I think he just wasn't interested in becoming a CEO. And certainly not, Dandelion wasn't yet at the size where I think it was. I get it. I get it looking back. But anyway, he declined to become CEO. But he had this person who had been his chief marketing officer at Power, and he thought so highly of him. His name was Michael, one of his best people. He was like, you should check with Michael, essentially. And so the way I tried to de-risk this transition was what better like vetting could you do than having a mentor who you trust so much, have like so many years of experience working so closely with a person that they think highly of, right? I was like better than I could ever do by interviewing, I felt. So we did end up hiring Michael, and I am very thankful that he stepped in when he did because I had two very young kids at the time. We were based in New York, and when COVID hit, it was like childcare disappeared. New York was on lockdown. We had to do a huge layoff. It was like we weren't even allowed to work as a company in New York during COVID because they had only essential businesses and we weren't essential. So I don't know what I would have done if like Michael hadn't stepped in at that time. So that's how the transition went. But I think you're right that it is hard. It is a hard decision to make.
It is hard, and also you have to come to an inflection point knowing like what your best skill sets are in a company. And sometimes even though you're founder, sometimes doesn't mean that correlates to the CEO, right? I think the founder of Shopify, always want to be a product person and then hire a CEO out because he's like, I'm not a chief executive officer, I'm a chief product officer. Like that's where I really thrive at. And I'm gonna ask you, Kathy, you went from fundraising to creating the vision and idea to also integrating the idea, being a CEO, then you were not a CEO. What is your zone genius in the company? Where do people find the highest value of you when running Dandelion today?
Well, today my role is president and CTO. So I run the engineering team, but I also run our people team, including recruiting and HR. And I do a lot of our external storytelling as well. And I also run policy at the moment. So I have sort of a mix of functions that report to me. But I would say that my zone of genius is that versatility. Like many founders, I can do all the parts of the business. I'm not afraid to take on something I don't know, and I can figure it out pretty well, pretty quickly, and usually do a good enough job and then help hire the person to do an excellent job. And I like that. I like getting to solve different problems and take on different things over time. I don't think of myself as I am this domain, like the product leader from Shopify. I don't have that orientation. I think I'm more of a miscellaneous. I'll just what does the company need right now? It's always changing. I will solve that problem, or I will figure out who we should bring in to solve the problem. Um, and I think the other thing that I do well for the company is I do think I've just have so much experience talking to different people about geothermal, different policymakers, homeowners, builders, talking to you today. It's I love talking about it, and hopefully I can do a good job of explaining why people should care about it.
So it brings me to the next point. You've raised multiple rounds of funding. Are you allowed to explain how much total capital you guys have raised thus far?
Yeah, we've raised about 140 million. It's a lot.
Wow. It's off to you. 140 million raised. And I think what people can appreciate the most is you can speak naturally about your company, your product, when you speak from passion. People then just want to invest in the founder and take bets on you. Well, if you were to give any advice on raising money, especially raising $140 million from venture capital, what do you think is the biggest takeaway there?
Certainly what people are looking for varies a lot depending on the stage of the company. And I think for me, um, you know, we have succeeded in raising a lot of money, but even today, I wouldn't say that I personally am a great fundraiser. I have found great fundraisers to surround myself with and become really passionate about the company. And so especially in the later, larger rounds of funding, they deserve the credit for that funding. And it kind of goes to my point about figuring out what the problem is and finding the right person to take the job on and being versatile and not necessarily being wedded to the status of the CEO title if it's not truly what I wanted. I think one thing that I've done right is um, putting my ego aside a little bit and realizing this will actually be a much better experience for me and also better for the company if I don't have preconceived notions about what I have to do as the founder. And so some founders are great at fundraising and love fundraising and like to get good at the game. And power to them, that is a best case scenario. And I admire those founders and, you know, maybe someday I will be among them, but honestly, probably not because I'm an introverted person who understates things and just like have a lot of traits that don't necessarily lend themselves to fundraising. Um, but that's fine. Like I found my compliments and like I found what's the company has needed and it's worked.
Kathy, who do you think has been the most impactful to you while building Dandelion, and who took the biggest risk on you during the endeavor while you're building this company?
It's an easy question for me. So the answer is certainly Dan Yates. He lives in Washington, DC. I was living in New York when we first got in touch because NEA, the investor NEA, used Dan to vet me and Dandelion for one of our earliest rounds of funding. So they had invested in O-Power. It had been a great success. So they said, hey, Dan, we're considering an investment in this Dandelion company. Can you vet it? And if you think it's good, maybe we'll invest. And if you don't think it's good, we probably won't invest. It was that type of situation. So like very high stakes for me. But Dan lives in DC. I was living in New York. Dan was like, let's meet up in Delaware because it just happened to be halfway between our two places on the train. So we met up in this very random, like, I don't know, plaza in Delaware that I haven't been to since. Never before nor since. But luckily for me, we just really got along. And I think he just got really excited about geothermal. And it was the best thing that has happened to me in this journey was that he just became obsessed with geothermal because he's just like a very effective operator. He had been a founder CEO for his whole career, had successfully founded and exited 2 companies, great fundraiser, just like great business person, and just knew how to do everything. Knew how to hire, knew how to manage, knew how to like all the things that were new to me, he was an expert at, and it made all the difference. Like I don't think it likely Dandelion would have achieved what it has achieved without him. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have, so I owe him a lot. He joined our board and then became our CEO in the summer of 2023. And the time since he's been CEO has been my favorite time at the company. And it's just been, I would say, like just the company has done the best under his leadership. So that's who I owe so much to.
Kathy, you seem like you can attract really good fundraising. You can attract really good people. If I were to put you on the spot right now, how would you pitch Dandelion in under 10 seconds to the audience?
Dandelion's a geothermal heating and cooling company, and geothermal is the best value proposition for homeowners, builders, and utilities, and also it's best for the environment.
I love that. Kathy, I think what you're doing today, building a company with a very strong mission, is incredible. First and foremost, you're doing no easy task. You raised $140 million. You're probably on your way to $1 billion very soon. As we end every single podcast, I like to do a rapid fire questions, as I told you early in the beginning. So let's run through these a little bit right now. Let's see what you got. Kathy, whose social media account do you find most entertaining today?
Probably Elon Musk's.
There we go. All right.
Not a unique answer, but an honest one.
Money is not an issue. What company are you buying today?
I would probably buy whatever if it's for sale, whatever, a company making chips for AI that's not NVIDIA. I would look and just see what other company is making something that's a little bit niche now, but maybe, could be some of the foundation for AI.
There's definitely a few of those coming out right now. What is one tool or resource you cannot live without?
Very hard question, but I don't know if this counts as a resource, but I would say sleep. If I get enough sleep, I'm in such a good mood and so capable, and if I don't, it's just a mess. It's like such a huge difference. So I try to remind myself of that every night when I struggle to get to bed on time, like I think we all do.
100%. Who's the best person you've interacted with and why?
Dan Yates has just really changed my career. I mean, he is an example of why a mentor can make all the difference. And the reason is he really took the time to get to know the company, to get to know me. He, like, spent real time investing. I know this is rapid fire, but I think the term mentor is thrown around a lot, and, like, a lot of early founders are encouraged to get a mentor, and it's very hard to actually do that. It's like somebody saying, "Get a co-founder," because it's so based on, like, your relationship with another human and just, like, you for it to be real and valuable, you need to have a real relationship, and it requires a lot of time and commitment from both parties, and it's hard to do casually or to force. Um, so I guess I think people underestimate. People are right that mentors make all the difference, but it's, like, very hard to just go get a mentor.
For sure. It's like parents pressure you saying, go get a wife, go get a husband so fast. I'm like, that's a whole 75 track commitment. You know that, right? Um, and Kathy, what's next for you on your entrepreneurial path? You're 10 years into this company plus. Where's the future of Kathy going?
Well, as I mentioned, I've never been happier at Dandelion than I've been in the past, like, year and a half. So I'm excited about some of the traction that we're getting, especially with home builders and expanding our market to start to put geo into new homes. I'm excited about the team we have, and it feels like we're doing it. So at this point, my future looks kind of like you would expect, more geothermal, but I'm happy to be able to say that.
I love that. Where can people find more about you, Dandelion, learning more about geothermal as well?
DandelionEnergy.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kathy, for your time. You've been awesome. People should be inspired by you. You're a fantastic founder, and I appreciate your time today.
Thanks for that, Sam. I've enjoyed it too.